Hello, everyone, and welcome to our panel today, The Path to Progress, Understanding Social Mobility in the Modern World. My name is Patricia Wood, and I'm an environmental underwriter at AXA XL. I started my career as an environmental engineering consultant, and with the help of connections and mentors I met throughout my career, I decided to make the switch into the wonderful world of insurance. Our panel today will discuss the topic of social mobility. This topic is close to me personally, not only as a woman, but more importantly as an ally. The goal of our panel is to explore the importance of promoting yourself, mentorship and sponsorship, and how allies can empower others to break out of their predetermined socioeconomic status. Please feel free to type questions in the CVent chat box throughout our event so we can continue the conversation after our discussion. With us today, we have Daniel Brown, the VP of Operations at Bold Penguin, Teniqua Davenport, Vice President, Market Leader at IMA Financial Group, Cintia Laut, Vice President of Client Management at Cigna, and Yvonne Miller, Head of Strategic Vendor Relationships at Zurich. Dan, can you please share with us some of your background?
Absolutely, and thanks for that, Patricia. So I'm Dan, VP of Operations at Bold Penguin, which is an insurance tech company, develops software for the process of getting a small insurance quote back. Technology or accessing the carriers that we have relationship with. A little bit about my background: studied math and computer science as an undergrad, and sort of like most people, but it's been a very rewarding career. I've been in the industry my entire career. Started as an underwriter trainee right out of college at Chubb, and then I worked my way through various underwriting levels. I spent some time in sales and distribution, people leadership, and recently transitioned from the carrier side over to the insurtech space. Social mobility is something that's been very important to this journey and something that I had to learn how to navigate. So I'm excited to be able to talk to you all about that today. I actively seek opportunities to mentor or get involved in discussions like this where we can all learn from each other and share experiences. Just naturally throughout my career, I've always been interested in how leaders make it to where they are. So just honored to be here at this panel, to be able to have that discussion about what we know or what we've experienced in the hopes that it can help someone on this call. So looking forward to the discussion today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan. Teniqua, can you tell us about your background?
And good afternoon. My name is Teniqua Davenport, and the VP Texas Market Leader at IMA Financial Group. I've been in the industry for about 15 years. Prior to working in the insurance industry, spent some time in the finance industry and banking, and then moving on to an investment firm. I'm very passionate about leadership and especially mentorship. So I'm excited to be here today with you all to talk a little bit about mentorship. In my spare time, I do spend time mentoring others, in addition to volunteering and sitting on the Artist Outreach Board. I'm also a part of several organizations that also do mentorship and give back to leadership. So again, very excited to dive in a little deeper about mentorship.
Excellent. Thank you. Cintia?
Great to be with everyone today. My name is Cintia Laut, and I'm the Vice President of Client Management for Cigna in the North Texas office. I am really passionate about building up others and youngsters, especially. I do volunteer at Girls on the Run, and it's all about empowering the little ones to be able to grow up and move up and rise up. So I look forward to having this conversation with you guys. I've been at Cigna now 12 years, and I didn't always start at this position. So I'm happy to have a discussion as to where it started and how I got here.
Thank you. And last but not least, Yvonne?
Hello, my name is Yvonne Miller, and I am currently Head of Strategic Vendor Relationships for Zurich Resilience Solutions within Zurich North America. Wow, that's a mouthful. My team is focused on leading the development, communication, and implementation of growth strategies as it relates to those strategic vendors. So I've held various positions throughout my 20 plus years in the insurance industry, operations, claims, sales and distribution, business development, and of course, risk engineering. So with a master's in business administration and through my role as a manager excellence champion, I continue my dedication to helping managers become better managers. So on a personal level, I am passionate about giving back and love to spend time with my daughter, working with charitable organizations focused on foster children, domestic violence victims, and the homeless. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Yvonne. We have some great panelists, so I'm excited to dive right into our first topic. Cintia, I will start with you. How do you look to create opportunities for and promote yourself? Cintia, I'm sorry, we cannot hear you.
Oops, sorry about that. But
No
great
problem.
question. Thank you so much. And first, I'll start off with just a bit of a background on me to sort of understand how I did promote myself. So first off, I'm an immigrant. I lived in 3 different countries before moving to the U.S. When I arrived in the U.S., I barely spoke English. In the words of Lin-Manuel Miranda, I was coming up from the bottom. I'm a big Broadway person. There was absolutely no choice but to open up doors for myself. So it's all about opportunities to develop relationship with others is how I was able to promote myself. You can't do this by yourself. Developing relationships is really critical. I myself am an introvert, so developing relationships did not come natural to me. But it's a huge influence to my career. 85% of jobs are actually filled through networking. And like I mentioned, networking does not come natural to me. And I know it doesn't come natural to many, but I did read a book that actually helped me out, and it's called Personality Plus. Personality Plus was able to sort of help describe, how to build better relationships and how to be more comfortable with individuals and how to sort of tailor your approach to each individual. We are all, and I think as we talk through this panel, we'll all find out that, we all struggle with some of our things, with some of our weaknesses, and they're not necessarily weaknesses. They're what make us us. So being okay with yourself and promoting yourself it's huge.
Gosh, Cynthia, I couldn't agree more. I think we were line and step with each other through our paths. Self-advocacy is hard. It is really hard, especially when you come from a background that we did, and to get to where we are today. One of my early managers told me to get comfortable being uncomfortable because change happens. And I held on to that, and it applies here today. We live in such a fast-paced environment, and how do we stop and talk about ourselves? Do we stand on our desk? Do we say, I'm so great, look at me? I'm exaggerating for effect, right? But maybe it's not that direct. Maybe you can volunteer. Maybe you could use networking as self-promotion just by engaging, just by being you and doing what you do best, right? We have so many ways to contribute. We have the resource groups. Cynthia, you just mentioned that. I talked about giving back to charitable organizations in my intro. So what else can we do? At Zurich, we have this tool called Connections with a Z, of course. And it came about through an employee survey where employees expressed a desire for more opportunities to connect and collaborate with colleagues outside of the day-to-day norm. Very low pressure, low time commitment, encourage knowledge sharing, allows a one-on-one connection, a great time to talk about yourself, a great time to promote yourself and your desires. Also at Zurich, we embrace a growth mindset and have a passion for making managers great. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a manager champion and I volunteer alongside 15 other managers throughout ZNA that are passionate about the same thing, developing those managers. We support 1,500 managers and managers of managers. We touch topics on ready yourself for feedback, unlock the power of continuous listening, redefining talent potential, and one of my personal faves, meeting the challenge with managerial courage, which is what we're talking about today, all assisting in creating opportunities and self-promotion. Thank you.
And Yvonne,
Yes.
good call out was when you said get comfortable being uncomfortable. I have little ones and I tell them all the time. We were actually watching the Olympics. One of the events was diving, and they said, "Oh my gosh, how are they not nervous?" And I said, "They probably are. They probably are uncomfortable. They probably are nervous doing it, but you do it anyways, even when
Yes.
you're not necessarily 100% comfortable or nervous."
Yes, agree.
Thank you both. That's great conversation. I think it's very important. Push yourself out of your box and continue to do things that make you uncomfortable, because the more you do that, the less uncomfortable you'll feel and the more confident you'll be. All right. Dan, I'll go to you for our next question. Were there any moments of self-doubt, and how did you cast those feelings aside?
Yeah, there were many, many moments of self-doubt. And I like what Yvonne and Cynthia just shared about getting comfortable being uncomfortable. I also heard that. So I feel like maybe that's just a rite of passage when you enter into your career. But yeah, there were a lot of moments of self-doubt, throughout my career. Often times when I was given like stretch assignments, or if I got a promotion, even though I worked hard to earn those opportunities, I couldn't help but feel, like maybe I'm not ready, or perhaps just feel so that I use to overcome this. The first one is just creating my own, what I call board of directors. It's a group of people, and they don't all know each other. Some do, but I identify them as people that I respect and trust. And I go to them, and they sort of hold me accountable. They also encourage me, as I am navigating my career, and that's been very beneficial. They also help me stay grounded in my values, because you might have an opportunity that comes up. You could be interested. Maybe it's the title is different or the pay is different, but it may not align with who you are or where you ultimately want to go in your career. So it's important to have people that kind of, make sure that you're holding true to your values. Another one that's small but big is practicing self-talk. They say one of the most important conversations you have is the conversation that you have with yourself. So if you find yourself saying things like, "I feel stupid for thinking that," or "I'm an idiot, I should have known the answer to that question," try to catch yourself in that moment and reframe that. Instead of saying, I feel like an idiot, I should have known that. Maybe it's, "Hey, to spend some more time researching that," or, "Hey, I don't know a lot about that topic. Could you tell me more?" By reframing it and reshifting it, it actually invites you into the room. So when you start feeling like that imposter, often it's because you're not fully engaged. So if you can find a way to kind of cut through that, ask some questions, that could help you get more engaged in that conversation, learn something new, and also build new connections. And the last thing that I would say is just being mindful of the fact that everybody's on their own journey. We all make mistakes. It can be very easy to see, a group of leaders, or even look at this board and think, gosh, like they probably have never made any mistakes in their career, or they're just perfect. They've just climbed the ladder so easily. But we all have struggles. We all have doubts at times. The key is finding ways to overcome it. That's been the big, differentiator. So easier said than done, but I would just say trust yourself, trust the process, and remember, like if you try and fail, that's just the failed attempt, right? You can still try again, maybe get some advice, get some feedback, and approach it a different way, and that's really the thing that'll get you much further along in your career.
Yeah, great, Dan. And you're 100% right. Imposter syndrome is real. It seems many of us suffer from it. I cope with my self-doubt by acknowledging the feeling. It's okay to have self-doubt. We all have it. But I challenge my self-doubt or negative talk. There's tons of negative talk. Nobody's my worst enemy. I'm my own worst enemy. I also, like you, lean into mentors. Mentors are an important piece in helping guide me. I also recently started to practice self-compassion, as you mentioned, being kind to myself. As a mother, I have compassion for everyone but myself. I'm last, typically. It somehow feels strange to be kind to myself, but I'm treating myself with kindness and acceptance. I wouldn't want my kids to think about themselves the way I think about myself and doubt myself. So I have to change that within myself. So all this growth and mindset shift is really happening, being driven by them more than anything. And if you don't have kids, you have a mom. Your mom wouldn't want you to feel this way. So be positive, be kind to yourself. And as Dan mentioned, trial and error. My mom always actually says, hey, even if you lose, my kids play, competitive sports. Even if you lose, did you learn something? And if you learn something, that's a win. So absolutely fall down, get back up. We just got to push forward.
Yeah, and Cynthia, you mentioned a book recommendation during the last question. I have two that I want to plug as well. The first you might all be aware of is How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's a good one. The second, a little bit non-traditional, but The 5 Love Languages. Really good beyond relationships and dating. It's also good for business because the key is just understanding how people feel heard. And that's a really good way to build connections and deepen your relationships in a variety of contexts. So I recommend those two books for strategies, especially if you're someone that's a little bit more introverted. That could help you kind of find ways to cut through.
Wow, thank you both. What wonderful answers. I know, like Cynthia said, imposter syndrome is real and it's something I think we all struggle with. So acknowledging it, I think is really important, and being gentle with yourself and taking care of yourself is so important. All right, I will turn to Teniqua for our next question. Teniqua, how do you define mentorship and sponsorship? How do they differ, and what are the importance of each?
Yeah, so mentorship and sponsorship, such a hot topic when you are developing yourself and also in professional growth. They're both very vital concepts when you come to just being in your career path. However, they play very, very distinct roles. When I was looking for a mentor very young in my career, really didn't know. I just knew it was something that I needed to do. Really didn't know what I was looking for. But as I have advanced in my career, really have found some really key people to mentor me, not just in my professional, but personal and also spiritual growth. A mentor in my life plays a role of just investing in me, taking the time to hear things that have happened to me along the way, giving me advice around, what direction I should go into. Sponsorship is the difference in that is that is the person that is taking your business case into the room, right? They are taking in and speaking up on your behalf in those rooms that you're not able to sit or be a part of. And so I don't know if you all are familiar, but Carla Harris, who was a former VP at Morgan Stanley, puts it beautifully of how mentorship and sponsorship work. She also has a TED Talk that's had over 5 million views. So if you get an opportunity to listen to it, I would encourage you to go and listen to it, because she talks about how a mentor really just takes invested and invests times in you, and then sponsorship, taking that paper in the room and speaking on your behalf. So those are the differences that they've played in my life, and then the differences that Carla Harris shares through her TED Talk.
Yeah, Teniqua, when you first mentioned Carla Harris, I joked that probably 100 of those million views was probably just me, because when I first heard her content, it was just so inspiring and moving and helpful for me as well. And I just continued to, listen to her videos and podcasts. For me, early on in my career, I had a mentor. He was in investment banking, great person to talk to about how to navigate like the corporate environment, how to think creatively about my career, how to navigate my career. But again, he was just providing advice. Very valuable, but it's up to me at that point to then move it forward. And, a concept that Carla threw out there was performance currency. The idea that, when you first start working, you're delivering results. And as you grow, it's sort of expected that you're going to deliver results. So that's where you mentioned the sponsor, and that's where that became really critical for me to identify that person that can sort of support me in that way.
Excellent. And I'm glad you mentioned performance currency. She talks about that in depth, and she talks about how with performance currency, those are things that you are doing and how you are showing up every single day in your role. I mean, if you're working for your manager or working, for a leader, it is important that you do the job and not just do the job, but go the extra mile. And that shows up in performance currency. She talks a little bit more about sponsorship and relationship currency. So relationship currency is getting to know the person that may be in the position that you want to be in, having the opportunity to connect with that person. And if you may not know the person and you want to find a way to connect with them, so you are finding time or getting to know their, executive assistant and getting, to have time on their calendar, or you're sending them a note or sending them an email and just say, hey, can I get 5 minutes on your calendar? But you're building that relationship with that person or that person you see yourself being in the next 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really important, matching the differentiating between the mentorship and sponsorship. I think that's really important and something I didn't realize early on in my career. But then also matching your performance currency. It's so important to, kind of practice what you preach and show people that you really are working towards the goal of that your mentor is helping you achieve. That was awesome. Thank you both. And Teniqua, to kind of build on that, how would you seek a mentor or sponsor? And also, how can you be one to others?
Sure, those are both really good questions. So to answer the first question, how to seek a mentor or sponsor, for me, I'll just share an example, and I shared early on, mentoring is a hot topic when it comes to career and professional growth. And so as an individual, you have to really decide, what you're wanting to accomplish with having a mentor. It's always good to find a mentor that is 10 years ahead of you and where you want to be in your career. It's also nice to have a mentor that is also younger than you. I have both. So I have one that is 10 to 15 years ahead of me. And then I have someone that's 5 to 10 years younger. Both of those individuals are, investing we're doing the reverse. I'm investing in them and also investing down. And so going through and trying to figure out what are you trying to accomplish to have your mentor? What are the things that you are looking for? Are they aligned with your core values? Are they aligned with your career values? I think it's equally important to mentor someone else. As people have mentored me along the way, I feel like it's important for me to give back. So seeking out someone that I see that is a rock star, or someone that's really, striving to get to the next level and becoming and walking alongside in them and investing time and sharing my stories and my career path and what it's taken for me to get to where I'm at today. So I think it's really important, very, very important for leaders and current mentors to also give back and mentor others.
I love the fact that you have these mentors at different points in their career. That must be a really interesting way to get different feedback, different perspectives, and make you more powerful and dynamic as a leader. So I love the fact that you're doing that. I'm going to have to steal that for myself. And what I would say is when I think about a mentor, I think about it more as a reactive role and a sponsor being more of a proactive role. Where the sponsor is actively seeking, opportunities for you. They're in those closed rooms. They're giving opportunities that you may not have had on your own, because they know your skills and know your talent, versus a mentor, they're kind of an as needed. Hopefully they are more proactive than reactive, but I think to your point, Teniqua, it's important maybe to be clear when you're identifying who your mentor is, and having clear expectations so that they know how they can best support you. You know how you can best be supported. And the same thing when you're in that seat. You want to be very clear about what it is that you can offer, so that you don't overwhelm yourself and the person doesn't feel like it's a burden to come to you. You want it to feel like an open door, and an exchange. So in my opinion, I think those are the tools you can use to kind of identify the right individuals for mentorship and sponsorship, and things that to consider if you are in that seat.
Absolutely. Thank you both. I think, it's really important to identify your mentor, have that mutual communication. I mean, Teniqua, you put it beautifully, finding a younger mentor or someone who has less experience than you. I mean, they always have different insights, different perspectives, and that's a really good point. So I'm also going to steal that. Thank you. All right. Next, I'll go to you, Yvonne. Our final topic is, what can organizations do to promote and support social mobility?
So thank you for allowing me to brag a little bit about my company. So through our ongoing commitment of fostering a culture of learning and development, we at Zurich have a tool called My Journey. This was designed specifically to empower employees to identify and harness individual strengths. It really aids in carving that path for development that resonates with an individual career ambition, giving a one-stop shop for skill development and career building. So it's an online platform employees can use to gain that broad understanding of current skills and the skills required for future roles. So those where they want to go. Employees can complete this assessment of their skills, which highlights, their strengths. It identifies some gaps, and then they can begin to prioritize and create an action plan for their development. They can quickly connect to content learning within the tool. They can browse skill requirements for specific roles they're interested in currently, and they can seek out positions with their current skill set. So they can go in, enter their information, and it'll say X, Y, and Z are perfect for you right now, where they wouldn't have normally known about those openings or thought about that career path. Employees will also have the ability to opt into working with an internal coach, and this coach will help explore their career interests. Sometimes we don't always know where we want to go, right? And we just need someone to help talk us through that. The coach supports and ensures employees are able to understand the wide range of skills that they currently have. Sometimes we don't always see all of our assets, right? All of our contributions, the value they bring to Zurich, and of course, what's needed for them to focus in on in order to grow their career. Within My Journey, we have this is the best part about it. We have an interactive job aid called My 70%, which refers to a model which says about 70% of adult learning occurs through hands-on experience. And so this is a really great way employees can take those new skills or skills they want to learn, right, and practice them in a real world setting. So it also provides support for managers to fill some immediate need. Maybe managers have a project they're working on, or they have a need that isn't necessarily a full-time position. They can post it internally as an assignment in My 70%. And this assignment, it's quite the commitment. It's up to 6 months, 30% of time. It's a true investment. So employees throughout the organization can view those open assignments and then apply, gaining that hands-on experience that they wouldn't normally have. So to wrap it up, through My Journey, we have the skills assessment tool and mapping. We have the ability to assign a coach and guide them through their individual career journey. And finally, we have the experiential learning opportunity through My 70%. And altogether, it allows for better alignment professional growth plans, and really deepens the discussions on near and long-term career options.
Yvonne, that's awesome. All of those different options that you guys are putting together to promote social mobility is amazing. I think, along with Zurich, there are all the companies out there are making progress, making sure there are opportunities for their individuals. It is a perfect way for retaining your colleagues. I know most recently I joined IMA, and so there is a segment called Dream Coach. And so that is also something that they promote to help colleagues understand their career path. So I think organizations are doing a really good job in creating succession plans or building out career paths, and it's definitely showing up as people first. I think in addition to that, just looking at the recruiting efforts. And so when you think about recruiting, not using the same old recruiting tools, but looking at other ways to recruit. So recruiting through people of color or organizations, or going out to HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, and looking at those universities to recruit people of color, to create social mobility in new industries outside of the norm, right? When you think about, you talked a little bit about job descriptions, looking at the job descriptions and figuring out it is aligned with what the industry is doing today. Do you have an individual that is sitting with an organization that you can bring up through the ranks or build out a career path with those job descriptions? And then lastly, you talked about internal training, making sure that you're putting together a training plan, you're putting together, again, a succession plan that's giving them a 3-year path, a 5-year path, asking, what direction they want to go in. Are they looking to go into a leadership role? Are they looking to move into another department? And so really actively seeking out your colleagues and actively putting things in place so that you can build that social mobility within the organization.
Teniqua, I love what you just said. You touched on the succession planning, and one thing that I've learned recently is we are trying to identify, it's standard, right? We say so-and-so will be ready in a year, so-and-so will be ready in 3. And then what happens when the opening is now? What do we do? Well, we look at those and say, let's bring them in and we can coach them up and lead them into the role today. We don't have to wait a year, right? They don't have to wait that time, whatever that time is. So I thank you for bringing that up. And also, I can't remember who mentioned it earlier, but we were talking about self-talk, and that comes into play when you have your coach or your mentor or your sponsor, and that self-talk really influences how you communicate yourself. You advocate for yourself to others, and we mentioned being kind. I heard something, kind to yourself. I heard something recently that said something like, would you allow anyone to talk to you the way you talk to yourself? Not even close, right? Not even close. We wouldn't even be friends. So, keep that in mind, just promote yourself. You are amazing. And if I have to look in the mirror every day and say that, I will, So thank you for that.
Yvonne, you talked about something critical that I want to comment on. You talked about when there's an opening or if there's a position and you have a colleague that may not have the years of experience, but could transition into that role. I think it's really important that organizations and leaders start looking at things differently. A lot of times we look for individuals that have that tenure or that 10 to 15 years experience or whatever it's called on the job description. But I found that when you give people an opportunity to do something that you may not feel they're ready for, they could very well shine in those opportunities. And it may take some work on the front end from the leader to, prep and be there as their leader. But I will tell you, you would be surprised at how and colleagues and employees and people are put in uncomfortable positions and how they thrive. So I just wanted to highlight that because I think that is very important when it comes to social mobility and career path, giving people opportunities to do things different.
I completely agree. And I also want to point out, I think you mentioned, Teniqua, job descriptions. If I read my job description today, I'd go, who can do that? You know, it sounds so amazing. And so I encourage folks out there that when they are looking for more opportunity for growth and they read a job description, don't stop there. See how you can apply what you've learned and gained in other areas through volunteer work, through networking, through trades. It doesn't matter. Look what you can gain through there and apply it to that job description, because they can be a little intimidating.
Definitely.
Just add one thing. I can just add one thing really quickly. With networking and looking at those job descriptions that seem overwhelming, what could also help is maybe going to LinkedIn and finding somebody that already has that job. You'd be surprised how many people will be open to just having a conversation. So you could just reach out and say, hey, can you tell me about your day-to-day or tell me about your role? And that can help you kind of demystify, to your point, like the overwhelming JD, and get some more insight from somebody doing the role. And also you may gain a mentor in that exchange too. So it could be a win-win.
Thanks, Dan. That's a great point. And Teniqua and Yvonne, you both also made excellent points. And I think it's something that, all companies should look at, and everyone should consider these job descriptions where they're searching for their talent, how broad their talent pool is, and how important it is to have a wide and diverse set of candidates, because, everyone's different, everyone has different strengths, and we need to promote that. So excellent responses. Thank you. All right, since we have some time left, we're going to jump into Q&A real quick. So this first question, Cynthia, I will direct it towards you, since you mentioned at the beginning of our talk that you dealt with being an immigrant and how you adapted throughout your career. So the first question we have is, based on your experience, what strategy would you recommend for newcomers who are still developing their English, maybe with a fully remote position, and without any kind of support system in a typical office setting?
Yeah, great question to whoever asked that. And a real quick plug before we jump into that. We were talking about LinkedIn. I am hiring. You're more than free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, since I have a broad audience. But great question regarding, the first part, which is English, isn't you're still a newcomer and learning the language. It's being okay with not knowing the language 100%. I think it's actually easier now because there's so many resources worldwide to be able to utilize. I personally, during COVID, I took on trying to learn a different language. And what I did was I went on, I use Reddit all the time. And there was a group that uses Discord to be able to communicate and learn a language. So that's what I did. I joined Discord and learned a different language than what I already know. And definitely practicing. You got to practice it and not be shy. You're going to have an accent. Hey, we all have accents. All of us Americans have accents. Whether you're from New York or Texas or wherever you're from, we all have a type of accent, and it's being okay with that. And then regarding your team being in a different city, COVID taught us to be able to still interact. I'm in sales, right? How do I still interact? And part of sales is having good relationships. How do I still interact when I'm not able to see them? And I think having that global availability to talk to others was what helped. So I would set up coffees in the morning, so coffee meetup chat, or I would call it cafecito time in the morning. Coffee time, 10, 15 minute chat with whoever I wanted to catch up with, right? And it mentally also helped me jump into the day. And then we would do virtual happy hours in the afternoon. So it's, hey, I'm shutting down, and hey, I can talk about work and what happened, because outside of our industry, no one really gets it, right? No one really understands this industry but ourselves. So putting yourself out there and using the resources that you currently have with technology, I know that it's a challenge, but definitely utilize it.
Thank you, Cynthia. Yeah, I totally agree. Doing something that makes you uncomfortable, just giving someone a call, asking them a question, that tends to develop into a further relationship. So it's really important. Does anyone else in the panel have anything they'd like to add? Okay, let's move on to our next question. And I will open this up to everyone on our panel. How does social mobility influence workplace diversity and the dynamics of team collaboration?
I think it's natural, right? It naturally happens when you have the engagements that we're talking about. There's not a set route. When we are talking about encouraging people to take the next step, that next step is an unknown, and it could lead in several different directions. And through that, it's naturally diverse, right? We naturally have to collaborate with one another in those being comfortable, being uncomfortable. Did I say that right? It's those types of situations. I think it's organic.
Yeah, I think the fact that when you have a group of people that come from different backgrounds, different experiences, you're going to have new and innovative ideas. So when you think about social mobility and you think about diversity, when you marry those things, right, you get people into a room and then you have better outcomes. The data is there that shows our team outperform, otherwise by a large margin. So I think it's just important, again, or that's why it's important, again, to bring your full self, because you never know what is going to be the thing that people resonate with, or what's going to be the question or the idea that you ultimately end up executing. So by being in a space where it's okay to make mistakes, you'll get some feedback. It's okay to bring up that question. There's no dumb questions. Let's just talk about it. Then you'll have really engaged teams. You'll have really satisfied employee workforces and better successful production outcomes as well, depending on the team you're working on. So I think it's huge. It's kind of the reason we're here is to kind of make everyone aware that this is how you be successful both individually,
Right.
but also as a
Right.
team.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with Yvonne and also Dan. I think, having different perspectives, different backgrounds, even different learning styles. I think about when you build out teams, you want to have different people in the room. I was having a conversation earlier around just, personality types and behavioral styles, and just having those differences sitting, on your team. Because I know for me, I, am an executor, also coupled with details, but I definitely need people in the room that carry the creativity, can carry the pause and the green, red, and yellow light when we're working on a project. So I think just not just culture and background, but just different learning styles and behavioral styles is also can promote, social mobility just within a team and within a project.
Right. Teniqua, look at this panel today. We all came together to just discuss social mobility, and automatically there we have a diverse group. We connect in different ways and we don't in others. It's amazing. And it's
okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really love that point, Teniqua. My team is fully remote, and we recently did a personality assessment. And it was a really unique way to learn how what you say, what you don't say, and how those things are interpreted depending on your style. And that was huge. So I think you bring up a really, really good point that the way we learn, the way we engage, it's all going to be different. And the more you can learn about those different styles, the more impactful you'll be.
Great responses. Yeah, I completely agree. Another question we have is, it's a really good question. What role does formal and continuing education play in your career path?
Oh gosh, I think that's a great question. And I think you'll come up with, 5 different people will have 5 different answers. So my take on it is I would like to drop the word formal, and what does continuing education play in your career path? And that's I spoke about it today. We're constantly educating ourselves and growing and learning and fostering that type of environment. The formal piece isn't top of my list. And there's where people may disagree, but I believe it's the going back to my 70%, it's that hands-on learning that I think is very valuable.
Yeah, so for me,
I would.
I'm a long life learner. I think education, and especially continuing education, is key. We're always learning. Things are always changing and evolving in our industry. So it's important to always be learning and understanding how things are changing and becoming more innovative. I will share one thing that my mentors have shared with me. At least, you're reading, 2 books, always have 2 books every 3 months or every 6 months, whatever you want your cadence to be on, just learning and building on your craft and continuing to do things different, because what you don't want to do in your career is get stagnant, because you got to remember that there are people coming up behind you that are wanting to create their own career path and, have things, goals and accomplishments set out. So reading and figuring out and coming together with a community, creating book clubs, creating where you're getting together and just hearing about what people are doing different at other shops. I have a group of people that I get together in the industry, and we're always talking about, what are you doing different? How are you promoting your colleagues? What are you doing to build, camaraderie within your teams? And so it is very important, whether you're doing it through books, doing it through podcasts, doing it through TED Talks, there's always opportunities to continue to grow on your craft.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that well said. When I think about formal education and just different ways to get knowledge, I agree with Teniqua what you're saying about books and podcasts. It's important to be a lifelong learner. It's important to be curious. Throughout my career, there's been moments when there was a gap, right? I didn't have any experience, say, managing people or running a project from start to finish. So what I did was I went to volunteer opportunities. It so happened that volunteer board seat, that gave me the opportunity to lead a project from start to finish, to manage a group of individuals, even though that wasn't in my full-time job, that I could bring to the table, especially if I'm in an interview, I can give a real example of a way that I was able to carry a project from start to finish. So I agree. I think there's a lot of ways to go about it. You can go the formal route and get a degree, but then you could also get the opportunities through volunteer or otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I echo what everyone else said about formal education. And, we're in an industry that regulations always change all the time, products always change. So it feels like naturally education's always happening. So I'm going to take a little bit of a sidestep and say it's also education as to what your passion is. So is your passion sewing? Go take classes for sewing. Like, it's all about being well-rounded, and it's not just work all the time. That's really important as well. So education on what your hobbies are and getting better at your hobbies. They're all going to help in your career path.
Yeah.
Great points. Thank you all. Our next question, I think I will direct this towards Teniqua. I think you were the first person that brought this up. Imposter syndrome. Is it always negative, or is there a way to put a positive spin on it?
I would say it is a way to put a positive spin on it. I think a lot of times, and I will speak for myself, there have been times where I have saw JD's job descriptions and I'm like, I don't have 15 or 20 years, experience to do the job. And come to find out, you don't need that. And so you take the risk, and take the risk is the positive side of it, right? Because as I spoke earlier, there are opportunities for leaders to give people a chance regardless of years of experience and talent and skill set, right? So when you think about imposter syndrome, you just do it scared, right? And you do it scared until you get it. And then you think back, why was I even scared? Like, why would I think I could even do the job? And then you move on to the next thing. So I think that's the positive spin, is that you just do it scared and you're uncomfortable. And then when you get comfortable, you find the next uncomfortable thing to do, right? And you keep remaining uncomfortable until you decide that, you know what, I've done all I can do. I'm going to bring my mentee up and I'm going to move on to the next level. But yes, that is the positive spin is doing it scared and remaining uncomfortable.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. We're all dealing with things that make us uncomfortable and can tend to be hard on ourselves, which in a way can be, kind of push us to do more. So I think it's definitely a good way to look at that. Our next question is, what are some of the tough challenges and obstacles that a diverse person may encounter in terms of social mobility in the workplace? And I think, we can be as candid as you all feel comfortable being.
I think one of the challenges would not seeing someone that looks like you in leadership that you would, ask to be your mentor or ask to be your sponsor. I think that those become challenges because there's a lot of people that want that mentorship or want that sponsorship, but they may be afraid to ask someone because they don't look like them. But I would say, if that person, regardless of the way they show up, if they don't look like you, I would say, what are the other characteristics that may align with what you're looking for? And so I know it may be difficult to step out on something or doing something different, but I think though that is a huge challenge is in leadership, there's a small percentage of people of color. So those individuals that are minorities have a difficult time identifying with certain leaders, but it's on the leaders also to step up and say, hey, you know what, I want to bridge that gap. I want to bring you alongside of me. And regardless that we don't have, the same background or from the same culture, we can get to know one another and I may be able to add value to you and you add value to me. So regardless of what each person looks like, there may be, an option to overcome that challenge.
Yeah, one thing I'll mention. I'm first generation, the only one of 6 kids born in the U.S. All my family's born in Jamaica. And I remember when my first role at Chubb as an underwriter trainee, there was a word I would say. I know now it's orange, but I just say orange because and people would be like, well, what are you saying? And because of that, then it kind of made me feel a little bit self-conscious speaking up in meetings. And so I just had to kind of work through that. So I would say the first thing is kind of getting out of my own way, getting out of my own head. And I know we've talked about that today. And then just underscoring the point of not feeling like you need to have everything 100% of what the resume or the JD is asking for. How now being on the side of hiring and reviewing candidates, I'll tell you that, often there are a lot of people that get jobs that don't have everything on the resume because really you want a strong person, you want someone that can grow into it and that you feel confident will do the job. So I would say my biggest challenge or obstacle as a person of color in the workplace was really just getting out of my own head and having more of a growth mindset and knowing that I can do it, I am capable and I can develop the skills.
Excellent. Thank you both. We have a couple minutes left. One of the questions, just asking Dan, if you don't mind, if you could kindly reiterate the titles of the two books you previously mentioned.
Sure. So the first was How to Win Friends and Influence People, and the second was The Five Love Languages.
Awesome, thank you. And just to kind of build on that question, do any of you have any recommendations for book recommendations for social mobility or social self-promotion, things that you may have read, even TED Talks, things that can, inspire others to, move forward in their career?
And so most recently, I read a book by John Maxwell called Failing Forward. It was a great book, and it talks about it's okay to fail. It's often good to fail. And so I would recommend that book. So Failing Forward by John Maxwell. And then again, if you are in a position where you're looking to find a mentor, or you're at a position in your career, you're looking for that sponsor, I would encourage and recommend everyone, if you have not gone on to Carla Harris's TED Talk, for you to do that very soon, because it is an amazing talk.
I'll add, there's also additional TED Talks regarding imposter syndrome. You can Google them and they're great. They give really good feedback. And as I mentioned earlier, Personality Plus is a great book. It's sort of how to influence people. I hate that word because I feel like you're not being very kind if you're doing that, but it's really key. It's developing relationships. If you develop relationships, you feel comfortable around people, and you're more likely to just be able to be more successful and move up the ladder. So again, I plug in for Personality Plus.
One more I'll add, Carla Harris's Strategize to Win is an excellent book. It even has strategies for negotiating raises and things. So she's awesome. You want to check her out.
Great. Well, thank you all for your responses. I'll definitely have to check them out myself. All right, well, we are wrapping up. We have a minute left. And I just want to take a moment to thank our panelists, our dive-in team, and all of our participants for dedicating time to promote and attend this event. We hope that the information you learned throughout this panel will help to increase awareness of social mobility in the workplace and how the insurance industry can progress towards an inclusive and high-performing culture. Thank you so much, everyone.